Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of our new podcast, Life in the Valley. My name is Andrea Lyford. I serve as the Director of Education and Communications at Machias Valley Baptist Church in Machias, Maine. And sitting here with me is Zach Vaughn, who serves as the Senior Pastor of Machias Valley Baptist Church.
Hey there. Glad you're joining us in this brand new ministry venture.
Yes, we're excited to start this podcast up. It's something that we have been thinking and praying about for a while. And as you mentioned, Zach, this is a ministry venture through Machias Valley Baptist Church. And we want this to be a resource to talk through theological truths and to help equip people for a life of following Jesus. So with that in mind, we thought it would be helpful to start off the podcast talking about the vision and the scope and what we hope to accomplish in doing this podcast. So Zach, let's start off with a question. So why the name Life in the Valley for the podcast?
Yeah, good question. So the name is really dual purpose. Valley is essentially a play on words to describe what life in the valley of Machias, Maine looks like, if you will. We want to give a space for our people to ask questions and think through topics that we've discussed in the past, or in the midst of discussing as a church or community, whether that be on a Sunday morning, or through our mission, vision, and values, or in Bible studies and core classes, or just general life and ministry in this part of the world. So we really want to focus on the Machias Valley. But as I mentioned, the name is also dual purpose, in that we want to discuss not only what life within our local church and community looks like, but what does life look like practically as a follower of Jesus as a whole. And we get the name Life in the Valley from one of the most famous passages in Scripture, Psalm 23, which I'm sure most of our listeners are familiar with, and specifically verse 4, which says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." So in other words, the Bible is not ignorant to the fact that Christians, just like every other human being, live in a broken world, deal with sin, and deal with every sort of suffering imaginable. The Bible doesn't promise otherwise. So what does life in this valley, if you will, look like? And that's really what we want to help answer in this podcast.
Yeah, I like that, Life in the Valley. I think it's interesting when you mentioned Psalm 23, as a kind of very familiar psalm for most people, but David describes all kinds of places that the Lord takes us in this life, the different seasons, if you will. So if you look at Psalm 23 from the beginning, you see that sometimes we're in green pastures and sometimes we're beside still waters, that he leads us in paths of righteousness. And through the valley of the shadow of death, he's with us in the presence of our enemies, and then we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So that's pretty awesome because it's all right there. And we know that the Lord is faithful and his presence is with us through all of it, all of your life. And in our little church, I think about all the different people that we have in different seasons of life. And I'm really thankful that we have a broad range of ages represented. We need that, and I need that. And the elders and staff here desire to walk and equip people through each stage of life. It's kind of like your marriage vows, like in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. Life brings us times of ease and times of suffering, times of plenty and times of want, and times of joy and times of sorrow. So it's all right there in Psalm 23.
For sure. Yeah, that's good. And we're not even going to pretend to know that we have all the answers to that question. You and I, Andrea, are still very much learning and growing and continuing to see what that means to follow Jesus in a broken world. But we have been given his word and his spirit, as well as many other helpful voices throughout the history of the church in order to do so. And so we want to help equip others by putting some of those things we've learned into one place and discuss topics which both glorify God and equip Christians.
Yes, sounds good. Well, we have time for one more question. So with those thoughts on the name Life in the Valley, what are you hoping that we accomplish on this podcast? Like, what is the goal of it exactly?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to give three brief answers. First, as you mentioned earlier, we want this to be a source of equipping for Christians. So we really want to equip people in our church, in our community, and then just general Christians who might tune in to think through theological, biblical terms and what that means practically for their life. So equipping. Secondly, we want to define and clarify quote-unquote Christianese, if you will. As Christians, we use a lot of terms and phrases that we assume people understand, and I know I do as a pastor. But I don't always do a great job of clarifying those terms. So I think this is a good space to define what we mean when we say we want to be Christ-centered, for example, or when we use the word gospel, or when we talk about justification versus sanctification, and every other space in between. And then, as I mentioned in the first goal, we want to talk about how those doctrines or that lingo shapes our individual lives as individual Christians, but also our lives as the church. As we do this together, we want to make this theology that we talk about as practical as possible. So that's the second one. So we want to equip Christians. We want to define and clarify Christianese, and then thirdly, we really want to give a space for people to ask questions. So many of these episodes are going to feature follow-up questions from a Sunday morning sermon, for example, at our church. That's what a lot of them will be, in fact, here, again, Machias Valley Baptist Church. Things that maybe I didn't answer well, which I'm sure there are plenty of those things as I preach, or just questions that people want to press further regarding that passage or topic, because it's really hard to cover all those things in 45 minutes. But also questions that people have in general about the Bible, or about the church, or about Christian living, and so on. And in fact, I think we have a question about Halloween, for example. Should Christians celebrate Halloween? So we'll be answering that in a few weeks. So we want this to be a good place for your questions, listener.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think depending on your background, sometimes we've been a Christian for so long that we forget that we say certain things in church, or maybe you say things when you're preaching on Sunday that we take for granted that we know what it means. But there's a lot of people that either don't know what it means, or it's their first time hearing it, or even as a seasoned believer, sometimes you need to go back to those things to be reminded of what you already know and to clarify those things. So I think that's great to clarify the Christianese, if you will. Well, I think that's a great place to end for today. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're excited to kick off this podcast, and we truly hope it's a blessing to you. So join us again next time, and until then, may Christ be glorified in all that we do. Life in the Valley is a podcast of Machias Valley Baptist Church. For more information, visit www.machiasvalley.org.